For people that have never done parkour and want to know what it's all about, where do they start? Well, for me, and for many, many other practitioners, it all started with videos. Lots and lots of videos. And obviously with more and more parkour content going online by the day in 2021, there is a lot to see, and it can be hard to know what to choose. But in my opinion, if you're new to parkour, I would go back and watch videos by people like Ampisound. The music you can hear in the background is from a video called Are You Some Sort of Idiot?, which was an early one by Scott Bass from Ampisound, and has a wonderful selection of clips from jams in Cambridge. And I think this is a great way of introducing someone to parkour. It really shows off the community vibe, the fun, the games, the silliness, the talent, the skill. It's all there. It's a video that I've watched plenty of times. It gets me excited to go training, excited to see my friends, and I just think it's a really nice introduction to the playfulness of the parkour community and what we're all about.
From the Midwest to the West Coast, a dream. The outcast, it came out so fresh and so clean. And I must confess, I don't know everything, but I know what I know. You know what I mean? It's like
a good parkour jam feels like Christmas, and you can see it on the faces of the practitioners in this video. They are so happy. They're having such a great time. They're free and they're expressing themselves, and it's really a joy to see. The music really lifts the tone as well. So if you haven't already, please go and watch that video. It is another classic, in my opinion. And I do wonder whether my guest today, Dr. Tracy Rea, has seen this video. She mentions in this podcast that she's not from a parkour background and she had to do quite a lot of research, which involved a lot of video watching. As the newly appointed independent chair of Parkour UK, it was a pleasure to speak to Tracy. We covered a number of topics, and I was really encouraged by her attitude towards this new adventure for her. I'd like to thank Parkour UK for again commissioning me to run another podcast, this time with Tracy, last time with Mitch. So enjoy, guys, keep it locked. This is episode 37 of Parkour Coach Companion with Dr. Tracy Rea. So before we start, I guess, do you even, I'm assuming you have no idea who I am. This is very random for you, I guess.
No, I mean, I checked you out. I've looked at your other podcasts. I watched the one with you and Mitch.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah, I've been looking at your, coach development program. Dan Newton very kindly sent me some information. So, yeah, I've been doing a bit of digging about you, Sam.
You got the inside scoop, eh? Okay. We're back again. It's a sunny day in York, and I'm on Teams this time. I'm in very new territory. This is a bit scary. But this is episode 37, and I am joined with a very prestigious guest, I think, this time. So I'm a little bit, maybe a little bit nervous, actually. Dr. Tracy Rea. So welcome to the podcast.
Just correct from the outset, it's Tracy Rea. So I don't know if your generation will remember the singer Chris Rea. Road to Hell.
It doesn't ring any bells.
Driving Home for Christmas.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Oh yeah, well there we go. So he pronounces it Rea, I pronounce it Ray.
Ray. Okay, my apologies. Hopefully that'll help the listeners as well, who are of my generation, who will almost certainly get that wrong as well. So thank you so much for coming. And yeah, this is kind of in association with Parkour UK, similar to the last podcast, one of the last ones with Mitch, which was done in a similar way. So again, we don't really know each other. We're just going to get to know each other a little bit more and see what happens, really. So yeah, as usual, I have a number of questions. And the first one is super simple. Who are you? What is your background? Who is Tracy? So tell us all about yourself.
Okay, thank you. So I am a single mother. I think it's interesting how you start a description about yourself and what's important to you. And most people go straight into the job. But for me, I'm very proud of my 9-year-old daughter. I have a family environment where my parents live with me. They have done for the past 8 odd years. So I have that care and responsibility. So between the 4 of us, I say it's an interesting mix. My background, though, is quite varied in terms of the experiences that I've had to date. So my whole background stems in sport. I had 2 brothers who one made it as successfully as a pro footballer. And as a result of him doing sport, because I'm the youngest of the 3, I was dragged along to football pitches and to athletics tracks. And that's how I got an introduction to shot put.
Oh, right.
And I represented England at shot put as a junior. So, I just got bored. And one of the throwing coaches said, come on over with me. You're not doing anything. So I did. And that's how I got introduced to it. So, my whole background stems from sport. Loved it. I was also a regional netball and hockey player. I basically did everything that came my way. And when I went to uni, which actually what was called back then Ripon and York St John, which is now York St John University. That's where I went to uni.
Oh, lovely. Nice.
Yeah, I loved York. Would absolutely move back there in a heartbeat. Definitely some good memories. I stayed for 4 years, actually, because I was president of my students' union. And then, but I do remember, I don't know if it's still open, Flair's nightclub. Oh, there you go. It's made Sam laugh.
It is. I had the misfortune to do some photography there for a while. But yes, I do know Flair's.
Well, I used to be a bouncer on the doors there. Yeah.
Okay.
Way back when. Yeah. So I was the first female door person at my students' union. And so in my 3rd year, then went and worked in town and worked at Flair's for a period of time. Lots of fun. Let's just say when everybody else is extremely drunk and you're sober, it's always interesting to people watch more than anything.
I absolutely know that feeling. Yeah, as a photographer. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So after York, I went to Loughborough and did my master's in sport and exercise psychology. I always knew that I had this interest straddling sport and psychology. And as I couldn't pick, I refined my learning at that point. And I worked with everybody from the Women's Rugby England Academy through to the Women's England Player Development Centre, which was also based at Loughborough Uni. So I was studied there. And then I became a lecturer at Loughborough College in the foundation degrees. So my specialism was coaching and sports psychology. I was also a level 3 netball coach, had a big passion for coaching and netball. So definitely had quite a wide breadth within the sporting context of having been an athlete, having been a coach. I was an A award umpire as well. So umpired occasionally on a national level. So yes, was very much ingrained in the sporting context. But I then, after Loughborough, went to University of Bath, was a lecturer there, so again, in sports psychology and coaching, and then went up to Scotland and worked at the Institute of Sport. So definitely continued the theme for quite a while. Started my PhD on talent transfer. So how we could fast track an athlete within a very short period of time from one sport to another. Some that medal internationally within both. But ultimately, it's almost like the feeder system of one sport and how you could potentially specialize within that sport, but fast track the movement for something else. So, for example, we took someone who was in, the Summer Olympics for 2012. and they gained a place on the 2014 Winter Olympics within 2 years in bobsleigh. Pretty impressive in terms of the type of individual you need, but ultimately, how do you create that support system around them to help them succeed quickly, but the environment and helping them adapt in that respect. So at the same time as studying that, because I did that for 7 odd years, I became performance director of Scottish Gymnastics in the lead up to the 2014 Commonwealth Games, which as a home games was absolutely fascinating and hugely insightful. Extremely passionate people up in Scotland, and loved every minute of it. But for me, I wanted to progress my thinking on talent transfer. So I wanted to prove the hypothesis that you could move between industries and between roles. So I left sport. I had a little bit of time writing up my PhD, but deliberately targeted an industry so far removed from sport that it would make an interesting case study. So I went to financial services. I went to Lloyd's Banking Group, and I worked there for 3.5 years. So worked first as head of business operations for a couple of years, and then worked in the Agile Centre of Excellence as a product owner. So I had just given in my resignation, was about to explore I was about to explore the opportunity of writing a book to help people do their own talent transfer. And I got the introduction to where I am now, which is construction. Again, I said yes because it was so far removed from sport and financial services that it would be able to bring to life on a second time and help with the writing of the book from a semi-biographical perspective as to helping other people and how they transition. So I've now just been doing this role just over 2 years, and I'm loving it. It's a fascinating industry, lots to do. You could spend 10 years here. But typically I get asked the question, Sam, so what are you going to do next? What industry? And just for a bit of fun, I normally turn around and say, I want to be a singer. And people say to me, well, can you sing? And I'm like, no, but it'd be a good try in that respect. So I don't know what my next challenge or adventure is, but actually for me, with parkour and the context of going on this learning journey, it is going to be quite exciting because I'm learning a whole new sport, a whole new discipline, a whole new philosophy and way of life for a number of our members. And I'm looking forward to how that progresses. So that's probably my next adventure. But I think one other thing probably just to note then is that I'm also a non-executive director on the CIMSPA board. So that's the Chartered Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity. So Sport England gives CIMSPA a lot of funding to be able to raise workforce standards across the sector. And we partner with a lot of people, but actually partner with parkour as well. So in terms of like the coaching qualifications, etc., you have to get them endorsed and supported by CIMSPA. So I've been doing that. I did my first 3-year tenure. They asked me to stay on for another 3 years, which was fantastic. So I'm just going into my second tenure with CIMSPA. There you go. It's a very brief overview to me.
Thank you. So all in all, a very low key CV. You've done a few things, but you know.
Absolutely. I love adventures, Sam, and the bigger, the uglier, the more scary, the better. So I'm very much a personality. You throw a challenge at me and mentally I will step up and think that I can conquer the world. Physically, I can't do it anymore. You know, got too many injuries from when I'm younger. But ultimately, I love the idea of going and working with a team and overcoming that challenge and succeeding in whatever that adventure is. So that's my personality type.
Well, that's a fascinating and very inspiring journey, it sounds, so far, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So very encouraging. And also the way you're speaking towards the end there seems to reflect and align with parkour quite eerily, actually, because as you more than likely know, a lot of what we do in parkour is about facing challenge and voluntarily facing ugly places, ugly things, difficult challenges. So is that part of did that kind of did that align with you? That kind of that mentality, is that what appeals to you about parkour? How did you even find out about it? How did you even get involved with Parkour UK?
Mm. Well, I probably take this question from two different perspectives. I'll take it first from, what resonates with me about parkour. And going to interview with the nominations committee for the role of chair, I went and visited a practitioner, a club within parkour. I wanted to see it in action. I wanted to be able to understand a little bit as to some of the members and what they offer. And I watched a 60-year-old lady within this class trying to master this move of simply standing on a bench, which was thinner than a gymnastics bar in terms of the width of it, and to land onto a box and hold that position and that power. And I watched her mentally tackle this challenge. And then over this side of the class, because this was an adults class, I watched a young man who was on this block that was about 15 foot tall. And he wanted to land from the block onto that very thin wooden bar. And you could see himself mentally preparing himself, because some of his peers around him wouldn't even try it. They were like, no, that's just too much for me. And he was like, no, I want to give it a go. And that kind of internal dialogue within one's own head is what I find fascinating. And maybe that stems from my sports psychology background. Maybe that's some of the experiences that I've had when I've been an athlete, and also helping other athletes with regards to overcoming that challenge, or how do you master, your own inner voice. And I'm a big advocate of the chimp paradox. Have you ever heard of that model? Yeah, by Professor Steve Peters. So when my chimp, who I call Lucy, is talking to me, which obviously, can be louder on some occasions than others, then I'm watching someone try and face into that own internal battle. And what I want to have the conversation with them afterwards is, how did you dial down the noise? How did you go for it? How did you overcome and master that? Because once you've done it once and you've got that, kinesthetic feeling that you have succeeded, then that enables you to go forth and try other things. Now, don't get me wrong, Sam, I have watched a hell of a lot of YouTube videos preceding the interview and since then. And oh God, there's some of them and I'm just like, oh no, absolutely not. And I also then took my 9-year-old daughter to a class a couple of weeks back. With a friend of hers. And my daughter, is naturally a coder. She loves coding. She's only 9 years old and she's doing Python classes already. But anything physically active like that is a huge mental challenge to her, because physical activity doesn't come naturally to her. And within the space of the 2 hours that she was doing the session, she cried, because she was trying things. She got hurt. But what was more insightful was the conversation that I had with her in the car afterwards. She didn't like the idea of not being able to do something. She got frustrated in the fact that she could see other people around her doing it. She was trying it and she wasn't able to master it. And I think, coming back to your original question, so why parkour? That's the personal angle in which I come from, which I I'm intrigued by, and I want to know more in terms of the actual sport itself. But ultimately, why parkour? Well, let's be realistic here. They were advertising for, 2 senior independent directors. I've enjoyed my experiences at Simspa, and I wanted to be able to offer back. So I used to do that through my netball coaching and all the clubs and the counties I used to be involved with. And I don't do that anymore because I can't give up my evenings and my weekends away from my daughter, as I'm a single mother. So this is my alternative way of giving back, through boards and through, me keeping one foot in the door of a sporting context, which is my whole identity. It's what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. So that ticks a big box for me. So yeah, I think that parkour for me is intriguing. Yeah, I want to know more, but I think personally, I want to understand why people have this mental challenge and how they overcome it and how they use parkour and movement to be able to face into some of those, wider, maybe, life challenges that they have and how they use parkour as an outlet.
Mm-hmm. And what was that class like then? I assume you were watching the whole class. How was it? How was it coached? What did you think of the coaching?
Well, hold on, because as soon as somebody finds out where I went and then I make a commentary about the coaching aspect, I'm probably going to begin a little sticky puddle there, Sam. So let's just change the question slightly and say, what did I enjoy about my time and my experience within the class as a whole, not about the coaching. I appreciate that you're coming from that angle, and this is a podcast to help with coaching and education and the wider messaging, but I feel as though that's going to get me in trouble at some point. So what did I think about the class? I thoroughly enjoyed it. One, because of the range of the people and the ages that were in that class. That's what stood out for me more than anything. You had a mother there. I think she was a mother of 4 children, and I was like, wow, the fact that she was even brave enough to have more than one in my eyes is amazing. But the fact that she is able to carve out time for herself to attend this class. And when I asked her about it, I said, how did you even get involved in parkour? She said, I've got 3 elder brothers, and that's how I got introduced, and I've stuck with it ever since. And in between having the kids, I join in. I said, that's amazing. That is amazing. And then the older lady there who was over 60 was asking her about how she got involved and why she did it and stuff. And she said, just want to stay fit, but I want to do it in an environment with other people. Yeah, I don't just want to go to the gym. I don't want to be on my own in terms of training in that respect. So that was lovely to hear. And then you had the other range of the class in terms of, shall we say, the younger men, full of energy, full of life, being typically competitive with each other, and just watching them was good fun because it was, they were supportive, but at the same time challenging of each other, which was good. So that's what I enjoyed about it. I enjoyed the dynamics of the group and the ranges of ages that were there.
Okay, fair enough. And apart from videos then, you said you kind of, you binged a lot of videos before the interview and stuff. How much have you seen in person? Have you been able to go out to any jams, or have you seen people practicing, on the streets, that sort of thing?
So I have a number of sessions that are in my calendar from now till Christmas that Dan Newton has very kindly did the introductions with. So I'm going to some clubs and I'm going to go and see people do it. Yeah. I'm on holiday a week on Friday, and I'm going up to Holyrood to go and join in with a session outside, or my daughter is anyway. And I'm going to go and meet one of the coaches up there.
Whereabouts is that?
Edinburgh.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. Nice.
Holyrood. So that's the meeting place of where they meet on the Saturday morning.
Right, okay. Nice.
So going to go join in there and see how they're progressing. And I'm actually going to take a friend who lives up there as well, get her introduced to it. So what I'd say is I'm on the start of the journey, Sam. It's all a big learning curve, but I'm looking forward to spending time with those people.
Yeah, I think you're in a very fortunate and kind of interesting position, because you have so much passion and experience behind you, and now you're going to go and see these places and see these people and see this movement kind of with fresh eyes. For people that have trained parkour for a long time, in some sense there can be a sense of jadedness that you've seen all the big stuff, you've seen a lot of it, becomes normal. Seeing spectacle almost becomes quite normal, which is maybe quite unique to parkour in some ways. But you can go in there with kind of a very fresh perspective, and I'd be very curious to see, A, what you think of people moving, and then B, kind of what I was cheekily referring to before in what you think of the standard of coaching, because I think that is something that is important to me with this podcast, is that at the moment the coaching community could be more connected and could help each other more and could criticize each other more, because we don't have a standard that we're following. We're using different methods and different experiences. And so my aim is to kind of highlight coaches and then kind of say, like, how can we be better? How can we because we're all parkour itself is young, and then parkour coaching is even younger, so it's still very new. So yeah, no, I think you've got some very interesting experiences ahead of you. And so how when you sort of mentioned the videos that kind of made you say, oh no, what sort of things were you seeing? Was it more kind of when things don't go well, or was it more just movements that make you cringe because they look very dangerous?
So it was actually probably from an alternative, which is those videos that turn around and say near misses. I don't even watch them, right? And maybe that's because I'm a mother and I just can't. I'm fearful on behalf of other people. But I think that it's those that are, hugely challenging, that they are able to master, that it ultimately ends up showing by the end of the video that they've mastered it. But preceding that point, when they're trying it and they're working out routes, or they've already worked out what the challenge is going to be, and they're trying to, land it, for example, then that's where there's some near misses, and you're like, you just don't want any broken bones.
Yes.
I just don't like personally seeing people getting hurt, getting injured. And I think that's certainly something that's probably come to the fore ever since I've become a mother. So that's my maternal instinct kicking in. So nothing to do with the fact that, like routes that they're taking, or actually, what they're choosing to do. Some people that I've watched online are hugely experienced, and some of their moves are just phenomenal, and it's awe-inspiring in one way. But at the same time, there is that discovery phase, and it's no different to any other sport. If I worked for a period of time with ice skating, and to be able to transition through some of the moves, but practicing that on ice. Do you know how painful it is to land on ice? Yeah. So you're kind of making that comparable here, which is with some of the movements, or if you just get the wrong footing, or you don't get the grip right, how you land against a wall or over a wall, etc. It will hurt. So it's that kind of same element of wincing, and it's coming from the, having been performance director of gymnastics, it was like trampolining. Yeah. So when you don't land on the thread of the mat, and you land on the sides, wow, it's a thud. Yeah. And that's when it gives me what I call the judder moment.
Yes.
So yes, I just do a little no.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm referencing here.
No, I get that feeling commonly with young kids when I'm teaching, and something just slightly, it's like my spider sense kind of goes off, But yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah, that's a good point with ice skating as well. That is quite heavy consequence, isn't it? I think it's quite extraordinary the levels people get to in ice skating. Actually, it's quite something. Now, what was I going to say? You sparked something in my mind before, and I've forgotten what I was going to say. Yes, actually, there we go. So it's a shame in a way. I don't know if you heard about it, but there was a pretty big women's only jam in Sheffield, I think last week. So it was for women, people identifying as women, kind of only within Sheffield, and they went to a facility called Nova City, which is a big northern facility which a lot of people travel to, and it looked fantastic. It looked really, really good, and I think that it was a big stride for the northern kind of female scene, because we just haven't really had that very often. There just hasn't been many opportunities for girls to say, look, we're having our own space. It's nothing against the guys. We're just having our own space where we can get together as girls and train and feel safe and feel included and everything. And it looked fantastic, and I hope that sparks more within the north, because I know they've been doing it in the south, in London, for ages, donkey's years. But over this last year, and hopefully I've had something to do with it, there's been some growth in the North in different ways, and I think that the North is becoming more on the map with parkour than hopefully it ever has, and these things are really, really encouraging for me to see. So in your kind of role that you're taking up with Parkour UK, one of the questions here is, what do you think are the immediate priorities? What are you looking at first? What stands out to you is important?
Yeah. So I'm always going to say, in terms of the role of being on a board, is around governance and good governance, and especially the alignment with Sport England in terms of who we get funding from. So that will be a heavy aspect for me to be able to focus on. I think that the second part is I need to be able to spend time with the board members, get to know them personally, get to know their strengths and the skills and what they bring to the board, and be able to get the best out of them in terms of their contribution. So the chair of the board is slightly different in terms of the other board members, because it is more of a facilitative role. So you have a clear agenda, which you've agreed in advance with the CEO. You are able to ensure that the other board members are aware of what's coming for discussion, so that they have time to reflect and go and do due diligence or explore or have conversations, etc. You've got to be obviously able to get outputs in terms of an agreement. So it's all very well talking about it, but how are we progressing this forward? And that's the key about having elected members on there who represent the voice of all the members, or as much as you can do, which I think is going to be an interesting part of the evolution of my journey within parkour, to understand the different members and what their needs, their requirements are. Because ultimately, you'll never really find one sport who want the same thing. Yeah, they all have different needs. So for some clubs, it might be they want to grow. They want to be able to get income generation. For other clubs, it might be, more coaches and more, shall we say, development pathways and opportunities. I know that the next thing I'm probably going to say is slightly contentious, but where does competition sit in all of this? So, even the few conversations that I've had with some of the members, or some individuals that I've spoken to, have said, oh, well, there's a real split. Some say, do want competition, or why wouldn't you? It's a natural evolution of where we should go. To others who turned around and said to me, absolutely not, Tracy. This is a philosophy and a way of life. There is no room for competition in parkour. And so I'm like, I'm intrigued by this, because you have members of the same, body saying very different things. So yes, yeah. I think it's trying to utilize the skills of the board to be able to gain an understanding, but also then through my time of spending, that time within the clubs and with the members, of being able to gauge that perspective firsthand, to have those direct conversations and to get more of a sense check as to, if we've moved from justification, which has been our focus on our strategy, and it's moving to amplification, then what does that translate to? How do we grow the membership? Where is the target audience that will enable us to do that? So probably lots of things I've shared with you there, but first and foremost, it will always be about governance. And secondly, it will be about being able to understand the strengths of the board members and be able to work with them.
And how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this challenge within a sport that's fairly new to you?
Are you talking about the challenge of competition, or the challenge of just holistically?
Just generally, how do you feel about helping these things and making these decisions? And
yeah, I think I'll probably refer back to Sam, my personality, and the bigger the hair, or the uglier, the better. That's what I think is quite fun in life. And, this is not for me to make a decision on and to implement and to impose across a sport or a membership. But at the same time, you are never going to satisfy everybody. And there will always be people who will have an opinion. There will always be people who will complain. What I really want to hear about are those people that are passionate and understand that sometimes decisions will have to be made that they potentially won't resonate with or don't like. But ultimately, if the majority of the membership are saying one thing, which I don't know yet, I got to go on that journey to understand that, then we need to understand that perspective, but also be realistic on the longer term, journey of this governing body and how we are able to help it grow and resonate with other governing bodies and work with other organizations that's going to help with regards to reputation, with regards to impact, with regards to so many descriptive words. But ultimately, we've got to look at that longer term view as well, not just on, what's on the here and now. So it's about that blend. It's about getting that balance right, but always checking in terms of what the membership requirements are, even if they are split.
And just going back to what you said earlier about this sort of transfer of skills, the transfer between different sports and disciplines, I find this fascinating. Actually, I was watching some of the Olympics from this year, and I can't remember which sport it was, but I remember hearing about a female competitor who had only taken it up 3 years ago from another sport, and then she was in the medal on the podium somewhere. And I find this very, very interesting. I'll go on a slight tangent here that I, as a parkour practitioner, have devoted myself for a while now, over a decade, and this has been to the detriment of me playing any kind of team sports. But it's interesting that recently I spontaneously got asked to play in a men's football team, and I've not played football for years. I've not really played on a side for a long time. I used to play a lot, and equally I played some badminton recently after watching the Olympics. And honestly, I've just not really done these things for a while, and I'm not a particularly competitive person, so they don't kind of speak to me in the same way that the parkour essentially does. But I absolutely loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was so interesting to me how going into that football match with a group of, older men who I've never met before, and kind of having fun, but also being a different person to when I used to play football, and having a different awareness of my own movement and different awareness of space and timing. It was really interesting, and I'm definitely going to go again. And same with badminton as well. I felt like I just had more space to think and to move, and so I think that there is this slight maybe not taboo, but maybe there's a slight constriction in parkour of it is the be all and end all. I'm going to do this for my whole life and kind of screw other sports. We're done with those now. They're too mainstream. They're too this. They're too that. But I would encourage anyone listening as well who maybe thinks along those lines, like, dip into other things. See what you find there, because it's definitely given me a lot to think about. And some sore muscles in some unusual places as opposed to parkour. But yeah, it must be fascinating for you to see transfer. And what do you think? What do you think then between sort of gymnastics and parkour there with transfer?
Yeah, so I'm aware of the high level, shall we say, several years in the journey that we've been on in parallel with gymnastics. And coming from, that world a little bit in terms of having been performance director, I understand the similarities. I understand where there is potential overlap. And I think that someone described it to me quite nicely in terms of the difference between parkour and gymnastics, which is, within a gymnastics environment, to learn to do a forward roll, you've got the mat, you've got a very solid environment in which to learn.
Yes.
And that doesn't change. Whereas when you're learning a forward roll in parkour, you are learning and you can do it anywhere, in any environment. And the example it was given to me, if you're a bunch of kids and you do it in a forest or a park, it's being able to have the right technique to ensure that your body doesn't get injured or damaged in any way, so that there is that difference between the two. But I think that there is this also other emphasis, which is potentially how parkour can be seen as a feeder system, like gymnastics is to other sports, or how you can, like you've just articulated, the transcendence between sports, whether that's structured competitive sport, whether that's more about this fluidity of movement and the freedom of movement. And when I look at someone like my daughter, who also doesn't really enjoy as much in terms of the structured competitive sports environment like other kids do, this works for her in terms of parkour. But at the same time, if I was to say to her, do you want to do this long term? She'll say no. Now, rightly so, at the age of 9, why would you? Because they don't look past next week, never mind into next year sort of thing. But actually, there is something here that gets you thinking along the lines of, well, actually, the fluidity of membership and how do people become, interested for a period of time. And then if they've enjoyed their experiences, they may choose to come back if they choose to explore something, else for a period, or they get introduced through other friends, because normally it's down to connection. It's about belonging. It's about doing things with other people and that environment in which you feel comfortable. So if I look at my own journey, I did shot put for a while. I knew I wasn't going to do that long term, right? And I did hockey, I did netball, I did tennis, I did round, I did everything because I loved physical activity, because I loved moving and I loved sport. So if you were to, put me in a certain bracket, I wouldn't like that, right? That's my own personal journey. And that's the same within a professional environment as well. I don't feel as though I want to be labelled in any one way or associated with any one sport. I want to try new things. I want new adventures. And whatever comes my way at that period of my life, that's what makes it even more fun. So I think that there are similarities with gymnastics. I understand that. And I understand that the reason why Parkour UK was set up in terms of its own identity, how it offers things differently. But I think that there are, other organizations who see the benefit of parkour and how the movement and its philosophy can be used within its own sport or within its own context. But also there is some similarities about how it can be used as a feeder system as well.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think? We've got about 10 minutes left. Which question should I pick? Yeah, I think so. In speaking with Mitch and other people associated with Parkour UK, and you have already mentioned this about the importance of the community. How do you think, or how do you want to see the community evolve? Right now, we're in a position where we have what's kind of called the structured community, which is more of the coaching and the facilities and the formalities, and then we have the unstructured community, which is the street kids, people getting involved in more informal ways and in just enjoying moving and getting involved with the sport. What do you see as evolution in this small community that we've got at the moment?
I think, Sam, not to evade the question, but ask me again in 6 months' time. Because I think that's part of the exploration phase that I need to go through in terms of my engagement with the members and understanding, journey to date and what the perspectives are moving forward, but also to gauge it from, the board position, because strategy and where we focus our energies and efforts, bearing in mind that we are quite constrained with, the resources that we can afford to pay and, produce outputs that help the sport progress, we've got to be very targeted in where that future focus lies, because we can't do everything. And so if I was to go to 3 or 4 members or their clubs, they potentially will turn around, like I shared earlier in this podcast, and say, well, our focus is this. And then I'll go to other members and they'll say, well, our focus is this. So we've got to understand that. Well, I've got to understand that in terms of my journey in parkour. And I've got to be able to engage with the other board members and say, so, where is our energy going to lie? And use the voices of those elected members for them to be able to bring the perspectives to the board meetings as well. So, that they are an important part. Yeah. And then the independent directors and their perspectives of business or context of everything that they bring as well will help us do that check and balance in terms of what's realistic. So not evading the question, Sam, but part of my journey that I need to go on. So let's have another podcast sometime too.
Well, I mean, yeah, I realise, as I said, it was a little bit unfair, maybe, as it's such a fresh position. But no, that is very valid, and I think that it will be fascinating to see what sort of position you are in 6 months' time and further forward. So yeah, that'd be interesting, and I think it will be very interesting for you to see those differences as well within the different clubs, different facilities, how people operate. I think maybe you could say a flaw of the parkour community is we do have some discrepancies in how we want things to progress. Perhaps I could say that I'm kind of treading on thin ice maybe here, but I think with it being so young and with it being so free, there do come a few challenges there. The freer the sport, in some ways it can make things more difficult, because then you think, well, first of all, how do we define this thing? How do we coach this thing? How do we help people get into this thing? And it's not easy, with limited choices. If you say football, well, okay, there's some pretty heavy constraints there. You're on a field, you've got 2 goals, you've got this number of players. This is how you get good, and there is a bit more straightforwardness there. But I think the sort of double-edged sword of parkour is that it is so open, but that can make progress and cohesion quite difficult. So I think that these things will inevitably work themselves out in different ways. But something that I've kind of alluded to in one of the previous podcasts is that in a similar way that music has different subgenres, and that you can be a drummer who's a good drummer but learns to play different musical genres, I think the same can be said with movement and perhaps with parkour, that there are different strands of this very open thing, like in music, but your instrument is yourself, and you learn to play, you learn to understand how the instrument works better, so that then you can decide where you want to go. Do you want to go more down this sort of traditional 80s and 90s route of a sort of very what people call purist style, or do you want to be more progressive and strange and weird and creative and go down a more modern route? It's fascinating, but it's something that maybe I'd be very curious to see where you are in 6 months, as whether that comes out in what you experience.
Absolutely. And I always love a bit of Heart 80s FM, so I'm there all the way. But you're right. I think that if I look at some sports or even organizations in terms of their evolution and the journey that they have to go on, there is an element of adaptability. There is an element of ensuring that you're fit for purpose and in the here and now. And what that is now to where it is in 5 years' time will naturally evolve. Sometimes you have to lead the way in things, and other times you have to, almost consolidate. And I think that that's always part of an iterative process, regardless of the context in which you sit. So I like your analogy in terms of the musical instrument. I think that there is definitely just exciting times ahead, regardless of where the journey takes us. I think it's really nice to work with a sport where you potentially don't have the baggage or the heritage issues that have come previously.
Yes.
And therefore that makes it quite exciting in terms of where we go next.
Lovely. Well, I think on that note, we'll end it there. Thank you. Great pleasure talking to you, Tracy. Thank you so much. Thanks for the time. And I'm very intrigued and excited for you on this new journey. And it would be great to catch up again in 6 months or however long it is, and see what happens. So thank you very much from me. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, listeners.
Fabulous. Thanks, Sam.